What's wrong with Mike?
What's wrong is every comedy show I've taken part in that has been a total and utter disaster. This one's going to take a while, gang. On January 16th, 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia launched, and it would never return. All 7 astronauts would die. What happened? Well, there was like a piece of foam that fell off of something, and it whacked into a tile, like a heat-deflecting ceramic tile. I think it was ceramic. Carbon is what they called it. I don't even know. I'm a chemist. I don't even know what it is. I know it was probably expensive, because that heat-deflecting tile was intended to keep the gases and the friction of coming in through reentry from heating up the aircraft, spacecraft. And one of those tiles was compromised, and everybody died as the thing burned up. What does this have to do with comedy? It's a metaphor. You see, all comedy shows have their pieces of foam. The pieces of foam are the bad things that can happen. And the dead people are comics who go on stage and then die there. And you know what happens is often after a really bad show, a comic will walk away blaming his or herself, and sometimes they really shouldn't. Sometimes it's like blaming the astronauts for the Columbia disaster. But don't get me wrong. Sometimes it is something the comic did to themselves. Like you go up there with a maxi pad stuck to your forehead, you did that to yourself. You do that kind of stuff, then yeah, you're on a learning curve and you need to get better at what you do. But I'm here to tell you that there's a system to bad comedy shows. There's some systematic things that go wrong, and that's what I'm here to talk about. And I'd like to talk about, my experiences. And by the way, I don't know much. I've only been doing comedy 15 years. Haven't been doing it exactly like a hungry comic lately. That's the term, by the way. If you're putting yourself out there all the time, every time, you're hungry. And I think it's kind of like love. It has this intense period. Doing stand-up comedy, all you can think about. And all you want to do is keep getting back up there. And it leads you to do things that normally, after you sort of wind down like me, or at least become sort of calloused or branch out to other things to the point where you don't have to do everything. There's a point where you probably think like, I'm going to say no to that one. So what are the pieces of foam? The metaphorical pieces of foam are basically, I picked out like 3 really broad categories. The setup of the room, huge. Lack of a room is even worse. Presence of assholes, or their lack of presence. Those are things that are kind of the X factor. And you don't really have any control over those things. Let me give you an example, and this is a very mild example. So my friend invites me to do time. I forget, there was like maybe 5 comics on the show, an MC and 4 spots. I was somewhere in the middle, and it was a great venue. Kind of classy. It was a winery. Kind of a destination because it was in the middle of nowhere, which is great, by the way. And they sold tickets. So people are coming for the show. That's not like, doing a show at a bar in the Oregon district where any stumble-in can come happen upon it for free. It was set up, they sold all the tickets, small, intimate room. I walk in there, look around, one thing sticks out at me. And it was a minor thing. And it ended up being fine. But the tables are arranged like you would have them arranged when you go out to eat. So there's like 4 chairs at a round table. And so 25% of the chairs are facing like back towards the stage. Which, by the way, was a nice stage. You need a stage. You need to somehow have a room where you are elevated over other people. The subconscious like thing of you being at the same height as everybody is it's a problem because it doesn't really make people pay attention as much. So stage, destination, tickets sold out show, quarter of the chairs are turned around. I said nothing. It's not my deal. I didn't want to say anything because I don't run the place. And everything turned out pretty fine. I mean, I did some sort of new material. I hammocked it in the middle there, put the weak stuff in the middle, dug out myself out of a hole. No one wants to hear jokes about me having cancer. Actually, they do. Some of that stuff hits pretty good, but people started pulling back on me, so I got back out of it okay. And they were getting a little chatty. You know, people are drinking. Half of them facing away from the stage. They could have turned their chairs around, but they didn't. So people are talking a little bit. Okay. Headliner gets up there and the talking is increasing a little bit and gets upset. Calls somebody out. Hey, you in the mustard colored sweater. Why are you talking? That kind of thing. And this person who was headlining, very descriptive with colors. Mustard? Kind of like Gouldens, I remember. Yeah, it was mustard. I would have said tan. But nonetheless, it worked out okay. It was a little tense. We were kind of wondering, like, are we going to get out of this thing? Are we going to burn up? So it was kind of like Apollo 13. You know, is Tom Hanks going to make it back? That was Jim Lavelle, by the way, who he was playing. And he made it back okay. We convened we ended the show. People are happy, smiley, had a good time. Great. But it was a piece of foam. The chairs were a piece of foam. Metaphorical pieces of foam. You should never run a show with foam chairs. Not sturdy. Especially, nowadays. After the pandemic, we got a little chunky. Foam chairs ain't going to cut it. So here's the thing. What are these pieces of foam? And how can they ruin my show? Well, I mean, let's just go look, I'm a chemist. And so you can look at this stuff scientifically. You really can. There's variables. And I nailed it down to about 3 variables, which are really wide. Setup of the room. No room and presence of assholes. How do you take care of this? Well, first of all, the room, and I can say this because I tried to tweak this stuff a lot, and I'll get to that because I want to talk about my mistakes. But you can't have a room that is totally like daylight bright. And, the funny thing is I look at like posts, on social media, like I had a great time at the blanky blank, thanks to blank, the whole thank you post. I always look at the photo because somebody's like, get me on stage, get a photo of me on stage. Or you might happen into just being lucky and you get a photo of yourself on stage. But I always look at it and I'm like, ugh, looks pretty bright in there. There's something psychological about it, and I can completely understand. People don't laugh as much in the light as they do in the dark. The comic needs to be in light. People need to be in the dark. If you're going to cover something edgy and you got to look somebody in the face, it is just awful. I did a bachelor party for one of my brother's friends, and the room was like it was like one of these golf sort of things where they had a little spare room, the places like Top Golf where you go and you hit golf balls and then you come back and you drink beer. And for some reason, instead of a stripper, they wanted me. And back then I was doing a little bit called, like urban nursery rhymes, and it was kind of edgy because I'm kind of like talking in Ebonics, but I'm super white. And it worked pretty good, but looking at everybody in the face, I could tell that them looking at me, they could, it's almost like you sense this sort of weakness. Like, I got to look at that guy in the face. But, to be honest with you, my home club, still, I guess, I got to get back there. But when I ran the open mic, was Wiley's, and it went through an ownership change. And that room used to be pitch black where people were sitting. Not pitch black, but very close to completely dark. And then some guy wearing a kilt with a belly tattoo and a half-cut shirt, going by the stage name of Puke. I don't use the actual names of people who are negative influences on the universe, but if it's a stage name, then I can just say his stage name was Puke. What kind of stage name is like reverse peristalsis? Like, what do you, my stage name? Yeah, diarrhea. That's not reverse peristalsis, but you get the idea. Depending on which way you look at if you believe the human body has an axis like that Kerry, whatever his name is on Rogan, then maybe I'm right. But he fell off the stage, like literally, and Wiley's has a very tall stage. So I remember telling somebody like before a show, like, yeah, this guy fell off his stage last week. And this one comic out of Columbus, he's like, so he dead, right? He dead? Like, yeah, he fell to his death. No, but he got back up. And then when ownership changed, I guess the legend of Puke followed, and the room was slightly brighter. But you could tell the laughs didn't really hit. Or it might be my insecurities. I don't like looking at people. I don't do crowd work. I don't really like seeing their faces. I did a show once in Miamisburg where they flipped it. They said, let's leave the stage lit, but then also light the people. And that was horrible. Horrible. You could just see the disappointment on their faces. So you got to have a lot of light directed. This is not rocket science. This is not the people who improvised their way out of Apollo 13 here, gang. This is direct a lot of light at the comic and leave the other people in the dark so they feel comfortable to laugh at something that would be socially considered shameful. That's the whole point. That's what makes comedy so great, is we open up the can of crap that it exists in the world, and we have to say awkward things. And in some way it feels right. But that ain't going to happen in a cafeteria room where you can see everybody. And it sure as hell ain't happening outdoors, which I'm going to get to next. The sound. You need to have the comic be louder than everybody else. That's not rocket science either. Comic has to have a microphone with a sound system that projects speakers in whatever XYAB pattern. I don't know. You science it up. It's got to be louder so people don't talk, or at least they can hear you. And I'm telling you, I fought all these things being stupid because I was in my little honeymoon period. I was hungry, Don't call it a honeymoon period. I was hungry. When you're a new comic, you are hungry. I don't know about that. Go to Golden Corral. You see the hungry people there? Maybe they should skip a show once in a while, metaphorically. I ran a room called Fox and Hound, and I can shit on it because it doesn't exist anymore. Kind of nearby where I lived, I just walked in there and talked to the manager. I'm like, hey, you want to run comedy? They had a separate room. That's usually good. But this room was shaped like a bowling alley. It was long. And then we learned that, okay, there's one set of lights. They're in the ceiling. They're either on or off. If they're off, we're dark. If they're on, then, everybody can see everybody. So I think, okay, I'm going to fix that problem. I go on Musician's Friend and I buy a pair of halogen spotlights. and buy some tripods. Super cheap. $150 maybe? Hot as hell though. Holy shit. And I'm like, okay, now in addition to bringing at first I had no sound system. I used theirs and it piped in through the ceiling. Not good. Because getting back to sound, they were always cranking music in the other room. So glass wall between us didn't really do the job. You could hear the drum beats of cheesy 80s music in the other room. And on a Friday night, the night of the show I used to run, they were thumping it over there, man. And so it was hard to compete with. And so you'd had that bleed through stuff. Then you had people in the back, and there was booths back there. And when they were killing it with dinner service or whatever, they would plant people back there, and they're talking to each other because they're in a booth, and they're not even facing the stage. Some of them were along the edge of the room, but they're talking to each other because it's a date. What the hell do you expect? So eventually I became unhungry. And I told Damon I don't want to run this thing anymore. I can use Damon's name because the place doesn't exist anymore, and I'm pretty sure he moved. But I said, hey, I'm not doing this anymore. And he kept calling me. He kept begging me. I was running it every other week too, which almost ensures that it's going to die. It's way too often. It's going to die itself in a half-life of 6 months that way. But I kept it running for 2 some years. And another dumb thing I did was I paid everybody. I guess you really don't need to do that. I split 6 spots into equal parts, and I paid everybody $25, including the headliner, which is stupid because I should have paid the headliner more and then just gave everybody gas money. And I eventually did that. That was another adjustment I made. But the sound in that place was terrible. And I bought my own sound system, and then I put speakers. I even took a long-ass cable and put a speaker, just my little bass amp, back towards I was going to win this battle, that the thing was so long. The room was so long you could land the space shuttle on it. And I'm going to somehow defeat the people on a date talking in the back. Didn't happen. I strung a speaker back there, put it up on top of one of the booth areas there. It didn't matter. So there's certain things you can fight and certain things you can't. I went and started a show at a bar in Kettering called Cat's Lounge. They had their own lights. They were really cool. Didn't have to buy lights. Sold them. Sold my set of lights. Kept my sound system. Tuesday night in Kettering. What's wrong with the sound? The very next topic. Actually, it's the one after the next one. And that is presence assholes. I don't have an exact calculation, but if you can't supply enough people whose destination is the show, and you're below a 1-to-1 ratio, you are going to lose every time. You could try that. Okay, Friday night I can get people out. Yeah, Friday night people are going to be at the bar too. So there was a stage up front and a bar on the side. And when we teetered over 1-to-1, we had good shows. If we had more than 2-to-1, we had great shows. And that happened about a quarter of the time. That was a lot of numbers. Are you still there? Okay, good. So let's talk about outdoors. Dear Lord. I mean, I did during the pandemic. That was the whole thing. Do, shows outdoors, and I get that. That was a necessity for sure. But it just don't work. It don't work. Because of the whole light thing, because of the whole sound thing, because of the whole assholes thing. And you can say, hey, hey, hold on then. How about Chappelle? Well, first of all, Chappelle is Chappelle. Secondly, Chappelle collects your phone. Thirdly, go Google Chappelle in Hartford, Connecticut 10 years ago. Go watch that one. That's outdoors. And you can listen to the guy who's filming, narrating the whole thing, He's like, what a piece of shit. What a piece of shit this guy is. Because he's sitting waiting for people to calm down, I assume, so they can listen. People don't listen outdoors. It's hard to listen outdoors. Yeah, the Mark Twain Prize Award winner was a piece of shit. Go look at it. I'll show you how the X factor is the audience. And that's the thing is, there's people out there who don't really understand, and disrespect, I believe disrespect of comedy or anything is a result of lack of understanding. Generally, people who don't understand comedy obviously never did it. And that leads to the next thing. Like, you need to have at least an owner or somebody with some semblance of empathy for what a comic needs to do. A comic needs to pick up a microphone and make people laugh at least 4 times every minute. They don't have a twangy thing to hide behind. They don't have, well, some of them do, but a lot of them don't. And that's a different dynamic, man. So it would be fantastic if you had an owner that bought into the show, could look towards the idea that these people are humans. I thought Steve at Cat's Lounge did a good job of that. There was a couple of times we had some people heckling us. That's another thing that we go through. And he kicked them out. He would kick them out. He let them go too long, but he kicked them out. There would be times when running comedy, very often, I had a little tape that just played one little sentence in my head. And that sentence is, are we being a dick right now? So twice at Cat's Lounge and then once at South Park Tavern. Right in the middle or starting, some goofball gets up there and puts some money in the jukebox. Brock was up at South Park Tavern. A guy walked right in front of him, put $1 in the jukebox, and claimed he didn't know what was going on. He wanted to play some music. Are we being a dick now? Yes. Yes, we are. South Park Tavern was always tough. Shape of the Room is tough. Also, comedy isn't for people who think they're too cool for it. Did I just say that? Yeah, I did. But the funny thing is that jukebox was fake and it totally swallowed the guy's $1. And the owner's like, I could tell he was a dick before he came in here. That was actually the bartender who said that. But yeah, are we being a dick now? It would be nice to have someone say, hey, everybody, this is what's going on here tonight, and someone familiar with the venue, someone who's a face of the venue, to be able to be like, hey, this is what's going on tonight. It could be your Moose Lodge person, your Grand Poobah of some form. But I remember seeing a post from Jeff Jenna that he went and did some lodge. Jeff Jenna is fantastic. And I guess the guy was like, yep, go up and do your thing. Go up and do your thing. You're not going to even tell anybody, you got to break ice? So you need people who are somewhat sensitive to what you got to do. All right, so then I guess the fun part of this is that I can tell you, what are my disasters? I have a few. And I'll tell you what, these disasters, I don't really blame myself. I've made plenty of mistakes, but these were not Columbia, man. These were Challenger. 1986 is what this was like. I'll kind of tell you the why and the what. Firstly, I'm sorry. Firstly, this is how hungry/dumb I was. I was working on a project that's still on YouTube, but it was a project called Science with Mike. And I don't know if it was before that, during that, it was maybe before that. There was a guy who worked in student services, student affairs, that kind of thing. And he was a former touring guitarist slash vocalist. I'm not going to use his name because, once again, I don't use names of people who are negative contributors to the universe. But he thought it would be neat, thought it would be fun if we would have a sort of variety show at noon outdoors in Courtyard Square in Dayton. What did I say? I said, yes, I'll do 5 minutes because I'm hungry / stupid. So it's like middle of summer, maybe it was late spring. Sunlight's beaming down on us. There's a little stage, there's a little microphone, there's sound system all set up. And for the first time in my illustrious comedy career, I followed a clogger. That's right. I followed a gal who was dancing in wooden clogs. Man, that was fantastic. The audience was sitting about a half a football field away because there was no chairs. They were just, hey, everybody just sitting kind of like on the raised planters that had trees in them. Now, look, the propagation of sound is an inverse square law. The further away you go, if you double the distance, the sound diminishes by a factor of 4. 1 over 2 squared. So when you're sitting a half a football field away, that punchline that's really got a hit, first of all, it's got a speed of sound get to you there. Secondly, the amount of the sound is diminished so greatly that it's really doesn't quite have the punch of a room with people sitting in the dark. Everybody's sober. Well, maybe not everybody. It was Courthouse Square at noon. And then I had to be, now I'm beholden to my work. They sign my paychecks at that point. So what, can I whip out ass jokes? No. Can I talk about bodily functions? Can I cuss? Not at all. I have to do the cute bit about how I go to the hair, Great Clips, and I do get my hair cut, and I freak out when they show me the back of my head, or something squeaky clean. And while I'm in the middle of that, and I can't even really see that I hear any laughs, because the inverse square law goes both ways, by the way. I ain't hearing shit for laughs. This lady was coming out of the CVS. I assume it was CVS, and she must have been like 80 years old. And then right in between me and where people are sitting, she just kind of has a rollator. The little walkers that have the wheels on it, and you bend over and it's got a little table and you can turn around and sit on it. And she's just pushing it, and she's kind of just lurching forward and taking a break. It took her all of like 3 minutes to go from left to right in front of me, and I can't address any of it because squeaky clean for work. It was horrible. It was horrible. And the other thing is, I don't know, I used to believe in cross-pollination, but I'm not so sure I do anymore. I always thought that, like, hey, you hang out with artists, and, they like comedy, and you like art, and you hang out with musicians. I used to because the guy who ran the show was a musician. I used to do this show up in Fairborn, and you'd go up in between bands because I was hungry, man. And, meanwhile, there's all sorts of movement behind you. And, guys, at least they crouched down, or maybe didn't crouch down, and they were tuning their twangy things because they got to do it on stage right while you're on there. I don't know why. Here's the thing. If I'd have come through with my invention, they wouldn't have had to do that. Here's my invention for musicians who have to tune their thing on stage. Picture this. You got like the 1/4-inch cord, and it plugs into something. And then it has things that light up. So you can turn your little tuning thing, and your big string, ding, and then if you're in tune, it lights up with a light, and it says E. And then you go down to the next string, and if that's in tune, it says A, and it lights up. And if it doesn't light up like green, it lights up, red or yellow or something. That's my invention. Then you don't have to tune your stuff on stage. Tell me, musicians, what do you think of that? That'd be cool. Maybe I could make $1 million. I actually did a thing with somebody, his name was James at this point in time, and I said, hey, during the 5 minutes, can you stay on the drums and like every punchline, you do like a Letterman thing, boom, and it worked out great. Actually, it was kind of like just what you needed in that kind of venue, and people kind of dug it, and it kind of felt good to do, and kind of drum rolls when I was doing little actions, and I used my fist as a thing, kind of like Letterman. That was cool. And then I did it like a couple weeks later, and I said, can we do the drum thing again? And then dude was actually just not doing it right on purpose. So I'd punch my fist and nothing, and then he'd do the drum thing right during my setup. And a tape played in my head. Are we being a dick right now? And so I don't want to use his name because the second week it was totally different, and I don't want to use his name. But yeah, you got to get rid of the assholes too, And then it's one of those things where I don't think everybody understands. And as a matter of fact, all these things that were terrible challenger-like disasters were run by people who have never gotten up there and told a joke in their life. And that's the thing. See, it's not intentional disrespect all the time. That's the thing. It's disrespect that comes from lack of understanding, I believe, or I want to believe. Let me tell you about the West Carrollton Cupcake Festival. This had all the elements. And if I had to do it right now, I would show up, look around, and say, see you guys later. Good luck. But it was a bunch of us. And it was during the middle of the day. Spring-ish. It was supposed to be in this bakery/coffee shop, and we were supposed to be inside the shop. Now, coffee shops, they're kind of tough because, usually you're doing a show on a Saturday afternoon, or maybe it could be at night. Lighting's a little bit different. Usually everybody's sober. But we were supposed to be in I would have loved if we were in the coffee shop, but they put us outdoors. And I want to say that there may have been a stage, like a little elevated thing. And there was chairs set up, but then there's tables, and it's like those festivals that happen in the spring. You got the Sauerkraut Festival and whatever. And they're just people going back and forth, visiting tables, looking at all the shit that's, there. And literally, we might as well have been a zoo exhibit. Because they'd walk by us and not stop, and no one sat down hardly at all. And I don't think no one got up there and introduced us. There was no sort of PA like going on stage in 5 minutes, blanky blank. We were basically a red panda that people would stop and look at us and, yeah, they're telling jokes up there. Is that raspberry cream? And then they'd go off to something else. I would rather pass a Seaman Stone than do that show again. And I'll tell you what, they always say oh, well, if you're good enough, it won't matter. No. Kenny Carpenter, I have never seen Kenny Carpenter struggle. But we all bit a big fat one at that thing. Kenny Carpenter had to close that out. Like, once again, I've never seen him struggle. And he took his hoodie and he pulled it up over his head like the Unabomber and plowed through the rest of his stuff. And in the middle of the stuff, he's like, yeah, you know what, guys? I don't think we're coming back next year. It was that bad. I did a joke about the green room being a porta-john. No one even cared. And it was just, thankfully, a one-off. So, here's the thing. In conclusion, I've always heard the cliche, get on as many stages as you can. No. Get on as many good stages as you can. If you go to one of these things and you survive the piece of foam knocking a tile off, or you explode on takeoff, there's something good about that. It humbles you a little bit. If you always do jokes in like this comedy womb area, well, that's going to not make you very tough. But there's a point where you don't need to just keep doing those things. You kind of understand the dynamics, and especially if you're not being paid. Dear goodness, if you're not being paid, just use what God gave you at the end of your legs and get the hell out of there. Get on as many good stages as you can, I would say. And by the way, these bar shows, like I've seen one in Miamisburg, Bricky's, get converted to a comedy club, and that's a hot room, man. You can do it. It's got all the elements going for it. People, it's a destination, got good lighting, good sound. The guy who runs it treats everyone with respect. The audience usually, from what I've seen, I've been there twice, respectful. But yeah, don't be that hungry, comics. Just practice. When someone says to you, hey, you want to come to Indiana and do a show in the middle of the day for kids? And I say, what are the details? Well, you'd have to come there. And that's a fancy way of saying, what's it pay? Like, I'll do something like that if it pays enough. No, actually, I won't. I take that back. It's going to have to pay a hell of a lot if I'm doing a show for kids in Indiana and there's no mention of pay. No. Just get into the bathroom, stare at yourself in the mirror, and practice. Put the tongue has to go at the top of the roof of the mouth, and then you flick it down, and then you kind of make a little circle with your mouth. No. Do it with me. No. No. And you could be like, hey, okay, Mike, he's crusty. Yeah, okay, I'm a little crusty. Yeah, I'm spread a little thin. I'm trying to make funny stuff in different channels. Yeah, I'm not as hungry as I used to be. And I've learned my lesson at Golden Corral, the real one, too. But I'm still a fan. I'm still a fan of comedy. I'm still a fan of doing comedy. And I'm still a fan of getting up on stage. But you know what? I'm a bigger fan of myself. Thanks for listening.
Have a question for Mike? Email him at mikecanistero@icloud.com. Bye-bye.